Please take a second to subscribe, then like and share afterwards. We can really use your support. Thank you. "2020. The world took a major hit. It was the outbreak of the SARS coronavirus 2 that seemingly broke out in Wuhan in Hubei province of China. Within weeks, entire cities became ghost towns. It was like nothing the world had ever seen. We are about to discover that the pandemic that we are currently experiencing is connected to a dynamic recurrence of an ancient mystery that is a replaying of a biblical progression of national judgment. But what does this replaying lead to, and where does this mystery end? After the first shaking of ancient Israel, the nation hardened itself against God and turned further away. After 9/11, America did likewise. In previous episodes, we've seen that the warning signs and judgment have not ceased, but have continued to manifest. From 9/11 to the 2008 crash, and now the pandemic, what does it all mean? It means that America's fall from God has continued to manifest as well. And not only has it continued, but it has deepened and accelerated. And, mysteriously, it is following the ancient template. In the last days of Israel as a nation, even after it was warned and shaken, its fall from God likewise deepened and accelerated. One may ask, if it is following a template, then is there really a choice? Yes, there is. If there wasn't, there wouldn't be any warnings, no signs. Yet they happen for the purpose of averting what the template leads to. We are in the time of grace, a window to turn back, but so far it is only going in the opposite direction, the direction of an ominous path. And while we are in a period of grace, that means more shakings. And to get some insight into these present-day shakings, we can look at the ancient template to see what it tells us, and what we find is startling. If we look at the time span between the first shaking and the great calamities in ancient Israel, we find two dates, 605 BC to 586 BC. That is precisely 19 years. It was 19 years after Babylon's first invasion of the land that the judgment fell. 19 years, the time span of judgment. So, when we look at 2001 as the first shakings in America, that brings us to the year 2020 as the year of shaking. Interestingly, we have the name COVID-19, the year that the plague came to America. It was a shaking that brought fear across the entire country, in every city, and around the world. It caused countless millions to hide themselves inside their homes. It paralyzed much of the nation's economy. It caused a declaration of disaster to be issued everywhere. It shut down most of the planet for the first time in history. Even for ancient Israel, the plague touched not only the unrighteous, but also the righteous. The calamity does not center on individuals, it centers on an entire civilization. Like ancient Egypt, a plague was the tool of judgment upon a nation. The Bible shows us that pestilences and plagues can be a form of judgment. Judgments against evil and the pride of man, to shake kingdoms, to cast down false gods and idols, to wake up and call back the lost and fallen, a plague used for the purposes of redemption. And since COVID-19 has reached the entire world, what is so unique about this generation in the modern world to be judged? No generation of people have turned from God more than any other than the one currently living. As we've seen in the previous episode, we can see the grave sins being perpetrated, like the shedding of blood of innocent life. It is an ancient law that evil must be answered in kind, and the taking of human life by taking of human life. In episode 10, we heard Abraham Lincoln say that the blood drawn in slavery would be answered by the blood drawn in war. The prophet Jeremiah stood at the gate overlooking Tophet and the valley of Hinnom to prophesy judgment that would come for what they had done in that valley. They have filled this place with the blood of the innocents. Therefore, this place shall no longer be called Tophet, or the valley of the son of Hinnom, but the valley of slaughter. I will cause them to fall by the sword. Jeremiah 19:4-7. He proclaimed that their own blood would be shed. It was the ancient law, but killing children wasn't their only sin. Far from it. The land was filled with sin. Then Jeremiah spoke of the judgment that would come upon the nation because of its children's innocent blood. I will make this city desolate and a hissing. Everyone who passed by it will be astonished and hiss because of all its plagues. Jeremiah 19:8. Plagues, as in epidemics, pandemics, diseases, and viruses. The original Hebrew word used here was makeh, meaning plague or pandemic. Jeremiah goes on to say, "Therefore, the city of which you say, it shall be delivered into the hand of the king of Babylon by the sword, by the famine, and by the pestilence." The blood of the children would be answered by judgment, and one way would be of an epidemic. In ancient Israel, the people who placed their own children into the hands of the killers were the parents, those who willingly gave them up. The very generation that began giving up their own children to be innocently killed would have to be the very generation to face judgment. Even if it comes years later, that judgment would be concentrated on that generation, generally sparing the younger ones. In the replaying of the mystery, then, we should see a pandemic focusing on the older generation that was responsible for bringing in the practice of abortion, as we've seen in the early 70s. These laws passed around that time, around the world. COVID-19, with its complex properties, came upon the world and struck the older generation. The generation that robbed millions of its first breath was now hit by a plague that would require them their last. America was founded after the pattern of ancient Israel, and known as the New Israel. It once knew God extremely well, but it turned. And so, of all the nations of the earth, with more people, the plague centered its wrath on America. Still a coincidence? Within America, New York State, above all other 50 states, has more blood on its hands. And where did the plague center its fury as it landed in the nation? New York, the ancient law of judgment. And remember Jeremiah as he spoke the words of judgment on Tophet? New York City is America's Tophet. We may have been blind to it these past 2 years, but New York City is, yet again, at the center of the world when it comes to this current pandemic. Judgment struck the city once again. Remember, when the governor of New York allowed the image of Kali, the goddess of death, to appear on the highest tower in the city in 2019. It became the first year that the pandemic would first arrive. It was from patient 0. When that case was finally confirmed, newspapers around the country carried headlines that the virus had arrived in America. What was the date when these headlines came out? Recall the date we asked you to remember in our previous episode? It was January 22nd. Yet, there's more. The word of Jeremiah concerning Tophet was connected to a prophetic act. Thus says the Lord, Go and get a potter's earthen flask, and go out to the valley which is by the entry of the potsherd gate, and proclaim there the words that I will tell you. The clay jar. As he exposed the nation's sin against its children and foretold the judgment that would come because of it, he was holding the jar of the potter. Then he smashed it as a sign of the coming calamity, and said this, And they shall bury them in Tophet till there is no place to bury. In New York City, there was so many deaths that they ran out of space to accommodate the dead. Morgues and funeral homes were at full capacity, and eventually they had to send the dead to a place called Hart Island. Jeremiah's prophecy was linked to the potter, the potter's gate, and the potter's field. The ground at Hart Island, it was called Potter's Field. Also, in the midst of Jeremiah's prophecy, he cries out in mourning, seeking an answer to his nation's judgment. It's there that he speaks these words. Is there no balm in Gilead? Is there no physician there? Why then is there no recovery for the health of the daughter of my people? Jeremiah 8:22. The prophet was calling for a healing, for a cure, from a physician or a doctor. The balm of Gilead. Gilead was a place in Israel from which a healing substance, an ancient medicine known for its curative powers, came from. Now, during the plague or pandemic that devastated America, the nation likewise sought a cure. It took time, but the first glimpse of hope came when an American biopharmaceutical company announced that it had seen positive results in the testing of an antiviral medication on the virus. The news made headlines around the world. The FDA issued an emergency authorization for distribution. And what was the name of the company that was offering the cure? The name of the company was Gilead. Gilead Sciences. Its purpose is to produce cures or balms. America was now placing its hope in the balm of Gilead. If you can recall, back in the Return of Israel episodes, we covered the Law of Jubilees. It was the year when that which was lost was restored to its original owner. It was the year of restoration and restitution. It was to the benefit of the return for the owner. But there was another side to it. On the Jubilee, that which you had taken was taken from you. The Jubilee is a two-sided sword. It is a reversal of what had been done since the last Jubilee. So in a generation or nation that has taken life, we would expect a reversal exactly 50 years later. It took 2 days to pass the laws in 1970, April 9th and 10th. Do we see anything significant on those 2 days in 2020? COVID-19's fury was at its peak. The New York Times charted the daily average infection rate in New York. They discovered that it peaked specifically on April 9th and 10th, the exact dates that ushered in the killing of the unborn 50 years earlier to the 2 dates. It is about America replaying the template of judgment with eerie and overwhelming precision. But There is an answer for America and for the world. One answer for committing the ancient sin. Greater than any sin is His love. His love is far greater and far stronger than any judgment. It is there for all who come to Him. There is a hope. Through that darkness, the light can come. If my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then I will hear from heaven and will forgive their sin and heal their land. 2 Chronicles 7:14. It is the scripture of return, and now it is more critical to occur. But as a nation, we have not repented, so it hasn't come. But if we read the verse that comes before it, it reads, "When I shut up heaven, and there is no rain, or commands the locusts to devour the land, or send pestilence among my people." The last event specified before that promise is the coming of a pestilence on the land, a plague or virus. What leads up to the humbling, praying, and seeking is a number of plagues, because it is the great shaking that wakes up and causes us to turn back to God. But did locusts come upon the land in 2020? Yes, indeed. A plague of locusts swarmed in biblical proportions across dozens of countries, including all of Central Africa, India, Pakistan, Iran, Yemen, Oman, and Saudi Arabia. It's like nothing we've ever seen. They came in the correct order, too. And the shutting up of the heavens? This is a drought or famine. In the year of the two plagues came reports of another, a mega drought, the most prolonged in centuries. The UN announced a looming global famine, again of biblical proportions, that would bring about food scarcity, water rationing, and rising food prices. And today, we are seeing precisely a looming food crisis that we have yet to witness the extent of. Up next, we conclude the mystery of the plague and how it connects to the holy days instituted by God as an instrument to lead His people to redemption. Here on Prophecies Uncovered.